Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about today's topic, or this week's topic. We have ecology, but we're going to be talking about communities and how those communities develop. Okay, so in order to do that, I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss the factors that affect a population size, and we should really show it like this, so shouldn't we? What we've got here is the image that from the notes from last time. I noticed that when everyone did their Nearpod, that they had some trouble with understanding immigration with an E. I know the captioning is not saying that. And then immigration with an I. And so what the difference is that within a population, you're going to have birth and death. And so that's going to cause populations to go up and go down. But we also have the fact that in a specific area, sometimes those individuals will leave the area. And that's immigration with the E. And so I put a little blurb on there that E means exit, as in leaving. And then immigration with an I is going to mean coming into the population. So you're going to be coming from somewhere else, a different area, and into the population. A lot of people missed those words, so I wanted to make sure that we were clear on that and that you don't have any need for clarification. Okay, let's go next. Okay, so what is it that shapes an ecosystem? So within an ecosystem, we have many communities. And basically, all of those communities and the living things in those are going to interact with the non-living things. These non-living things that we learned about from the rabbit population can be, or from what you did in the gizmo, can be things like climate or temperature, the soil type, the wind, how much sun there is. So all of these things can affect the living things in an environment. So all of the non-living things can affect living things. And so what we need to understand that those living things are called biotic factors, and the non-living things are called abiotic. Now, the reason why we say abiotic is because whenever we put an A in front of a word, we're typically saying that that's not what we're trying to say, right? Atypical means that you're not typical. Atypical means you're not typical, okay? So abiotic means that you're not living, like biotic would mean. And so when we look at where an organism lives, now where do you think we call that? That was a term that we introduced to you last time, so let's think a minute. What's the word? Habitat. Okay, so the habitat in the American Southwest, the desert, tends to be where rattlesnakes live. So there's actually rattlesnakes here that live in the drier parts of the Bay Area, and so that can also be considered its habitat, the area where it lives. But we also introduced a word called niche or niche, and those words basically have to deal with the difference between a habitat, which is like an organism's address. You can find it here in the mountains of Santa Cruz. Or a niche is what its occupation is. In the mountains of Santa Cruz, the rattlesnake is responsible for keeping down the population of gophers and other rodents and birds. That's its occupation on the ground, what it does at its address. Okay? So when we look at a niche, what we're going to find is that it's a full range of the physical, meaning abiotic, and biotic or biological conditions in which an organism lives and the way in which the organism uses those conditions. So a rattlesnake is going to use the ground to live in, okay? And so that's its niche, the ground where it lives, right? And it uses that ground to perform its role in the environment. Here's another example. A bullfrog, or a frog in general, its niche is going to be to catch insects, but also to spend times in lakes and ponds, and then they also have to reproduce in the water during those warmer months of the year. Okay, so that's its niche. It's kind of like what its job is, all of the activities that it's going to do in that habitat. So a niche is a place where it lives, plus the abiotic and biotic interactions it has in that place. So it includes where it lives, but also what it eats, what eats it, where in the habitat it lives. Does it live in a tree? Does it hibernate? Does it migrate? Right? So how and when it reproduces. So that's its niche. That's its role. When we look at this image, we're noticing that within one tree, and that you're seeing here, in this tree, right, you have 3 different birds living in this one tree. We have the bird that has the purple background. It's living in this part of the pine tree, and it is just eating things that are found here in those branches. This part of the bird is eating, living, and mating and doing all of its things right here in the orange part of the tree, whereas this bird lives at the top. Because it lives at the top, it actually never actually runs into or competes for resources like the purple background bird, right? So this warbler in the purple background is completely untouched by the birds that live above it. They kind of have their own little home, their own little job. They're sheltering in place essentially. They don't go off and bother anybody else in their homes or in their businesses or in what they're doing. This is called a competitive exclusion principle. It basically means that they don't compete. All right? Okay. So we're going to talk about the types of relationships and communities now. This means that you guys are going to do a worksheet associated with it. And that worksheet is dealing with what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is competition. This is when organisms of the same or different species could attempt to use the same resources at the same time. So a resource means anything that they need to survive for life. Food, water, shelter. Okay, and here's a picture of competition. Here we see potentially 2 different species of hawk, and they're actually fighting over a fish in the mid-air. Okay, this next picture is 2 wolves, and quite likely, you can't see it, but they're fighting for the carcass. They're probably fighting another animal for it, right? Because it doesn't look like they're scoring off on each other. It looks like there's someone off the camera that they're trying to fight this last morsel of food off for. Okay, the next word we're going to talk about is predation. So predation is when one organism captures and feeds on another organism. So the picture of the eagles, they were the predators, and the fish would have been the prey. Okay, so the hunter, in this case with cheetahs and gazelles, a cheetah is going to be the one who hunts the gazelle. So the gazelle is the prey. So here you can see the cheetah and the gazelle, right? The gazelle is the prey and the cheetah is the hunter. All right, in this next image, you can see a great white shark trying to eat a seal. And then in the next picture, you're seeing a crocodile eating a shark. All right, and then this is the anglerfish, and it, you know, you saw it in Dory, or not in Dory, but in Finding Nemo, and it is basically a predator, and it hunts things by teasing the prey with its light, so they come drawn to the light, and then it wants to eat it. And then there's this next thing here called a wolf. And the wolf in a pack can be a predator and hunt a prey, and in this case it's a bison. And they can take down a sick or injured bison or even an infant bison together as a pack. So I thought I would share this with you guys real quickly. This is a link that I'll be posting on Google Classroom, so you can get it after you watch this video if you're interested. This is basically a game that I found last year. A company has basically simulated the environment of Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone is kind of like northern America, like Montana, and it stretches out like in that borderline between Canada and Montana. And what they've done is in Yellowstone, they've reintroduced wolves. The wolves were actually hunted almost to extinction in that area, not to the fact that they don't exist anywhere else, but they had been kicked out of that area because ranchers were killing them so often. And so what happened is they've become protected, and they've reintroduced the wolf to Yellowstone National Park. And so this company was able to simulate that environment of different places in Yellowstone, as well as you play the wolf, being the predator and hunting for prey. And so if that kind of thing interests you, I have the link there and a video there for you to watch if you'd like.
Symbiosis. With so many organisms living on Earth, living things are bound to interact with one another. Symbiosis is a close relationship between two species.
Okay. So it's any relationship between two species that live closely together. So you can have symbiosis with a lot of things in your environment. We're going to spend some time talking about the 3 different types. Those 3 different types are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism.
One type of interaction is called mutualism. An example of mutualism exists between honeybees and flowers. Flowers provide nectar to the bees. The bees use the sugar-rich liquid to make honey. But as the bee flies from flower to flower, tiny grains of pollen get stuck to the bee. The bee moves the pollen without even knowing it, and pollen is necessary for flowers to reproduce. In this relationship, both species benefit. The bees get nectar, and the flowers get pollinated.
So I also put a link here to the Google Bee game. They just had that come out recently for Earth Day. You get to be a bee, and you get to pollinate different kinds of flowers. I've put the link there if you'd like to be seeing what that game is all about. So again, this is where both people in the relationship are happy. So you'll notice my my picture there up at the top. The 2 people are happy. An example of this is ants and aphids. So basically what happens is, let me show you a picture. These ants are basically feeding off of the aphids. So what we have here is an ant, and you can see it's drinking the liquid out of an aphid. This is an aphid. And basically what you can see these aphids doing is they're chewing into the plant. And when they chew into the plant, they're actually sucking the sugar, because we know that plants produce sugar as a product of photosynthesis. They're sucking the sugar out of the plant and feeding it to the ant. And so in this case, the ant benefits because it's being fed by the aphid, and then the ant actually helps to protect the aphid and allow them to stay on the plant, so that they're able to reproduce and live happily. That is an example of mutualism, plus plus relationship. Here's the next relationship.
Another relationship is called commensalism. This interaction takes place when the sharks and remorae live together. Remorae use sucking discs on their heads to attach themselves to sharks. The sharks are powerful swimmers and do not even notice that the remorae are there. However, the remorae benefit from this relationship. The fish get a free ride, and they also get protection. Also, the remorae feed on scraps that are left over by the shark. In commensalism, one species benefits, and the other is neither helped nor harmed.
Okay, so in this case, the shark didn't get hurt by the remorae. Everybody's happy, right? But, the shark is kind of like, no, I don't really care that you're there. But the remorae is like, woohoo, gonna get some food bits from this shark. Okay, so another example is of whales on barnacles on a whale. Barnacles basically don't affect the whale. They don't hurt it. They kind of just latch on. And the whale just swims along merrily. Meanwhile, the barnacles are able to filter the water that the whale is swimming through, and they're able to get their food. So it's a very happy relationship for the barnacle, and the whale is kind of indifferent. All right, here's another example of commensalism, the clownfish. So in the case of a clownfish, so here you can see, this is like Nemo, and Nemo hangs out in an anemone, and what happens is the anemone produces these like stings in their little tentacles, and the clownfish actually brush up against those tentacles to get the stingers, so that animals know that they can't eat the clownfish because they'll get stung.
The last symbiotic relationship is called parasitism. An example of this relationship exists between humans and mosquitoes. The insects land on and take blood from humans. The mosquito benefits as it uses the blood for energy. The human or host is harmed in this relationship, as blood is needed, and the human could become infected with disease. In parasitism, one species benefits and the other is harmed.
All right, so parasitism, pretty obvious by this picture, getting the bite taken out of you. We've got one happy individual and then a really unhappy individual. This is definitely a positive and negative interaction. Another good example of this would be a flea is a parasite. Fleas bite dogs. It gets all the nutrients it needs from either you or the flea or the dog. And then the parasite basically weakens the host, right, is an annoyance to the dog, but they don't kill it. So definitely when a parasite doesn't kill you, that's actually a good thing for the parasite. In this next example, mistletoe, the thing that we kiss underneath, is a tradition for some in Christmas time. Well, mistletoe actually ends up killing trees. That's where it grows. You can see it in this picture. That big ball of green on the tree is actually mistletoe, and mistletoe is a parasite. And it'll eventually kill a tree. So much mistletoe will grow on it. The next example is something called a cowbird, and what you're looking at right now is a cowbird. Basically, what happens is a cowbird will lay its egg in the nest of a songbird. And so, in this case, the songbird is the one with the yellow beak, and you'll notice it's a lot smaller than the cowbird. And the mother of the songbird will feed both birds, thinking that it's its child. But in the end, the cowbird will fly away and lay its egg in another person's or songbird's another songbird's nest. So here you can see that happening. Um, this is a songbird, and the cowbird is basically overtaking the nest. So let's see some another quick clip of the video for conclusion.
Mutualism, a relationship where both species benefit. Commensalism, one species benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed. Parasitism, one species benefits and the other is harmed. Symbiosis.
All right. Well, that's it for the types of relationships in a community. So you have competition, predation, and then the three terms of symbiosis that you just heard. All right. Lastly, we're going to talk about, and really quickly, this concept of ecological succession. This is another type of relationship within a community. And this is basically the predictable changes that can happen in a community. So, for example, if you drive through the freeway and you notice there's a fire on the side of the road, over time, grass will grow in, and then bushes will grow in, and it'll look like nothing actually was there before, or it'll look a lot like things were before the fire. So this is an example of succession, and succession can happen in two different ways. It can happen in brand new rock, so like a volcanic rock, or it can happen after a disturbance, a forest fire, a landslide, hurricane, any of these things where the community was established and then got wiped out by some type of disaster. And so here's an example of primary succession. You can see the rocks after a glacier had melted away. So in this example, it's just dirt, and then coming and growing off of that dirt are plant life. Secondary suggestion would be we saw a fire move through here, and then after the fire, over time, you're going to see weeds, and then grasses, and then shrubs, and then a pine forest, and then maybe a more mature forest. So these are the different versions of succession that will happen over time in either primary or secondary. But if this were secondary succession, normally what happens is there's a fire first, and then you get the weeds. Okay? All right, well, there's another video that you can watch that helps explain this. We're going to go ahead and skip that, and we're done. So if you need a better explanation of what succession is, you can find the video at the end of this presentation. All right, well, thank you for your time today, and if you have questions, I have tutorial at 2 o'clock Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Bye.